Hello and welcome to a new episode at Mindset Mastery. I'm your host, Ahmed Asaf, and today we have an amazing guest, Cathy Domoney. How are you, Cathy, today?
I'm great, thank you. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Cathy. First, I want to thank you for your patience because we took a little bit at the beginning to start the podcast. Today, we'll be discussing the mental fitness and the trauma that everyone may be passing through that through our days, through our life. And we'll be talking about the mentorship or even the leadership skills at home and the necessity of having those skills. So, being a mom and being a teacher, you've went through lots of experience through your life. If you could start to talk about the traumas and how you went through it and how you went out from it using your mental fitness.
Sure. My background was teaching. So a long time
Mhm.
ago in England, I started my career as a teacher and I loved it. And I suppose my journey of mental fitness has been an evolution. So it's come in waves, and as you sort of take away a layer at a time. And I do feel like people step into what they're ready for. And so when I was actually teaching, I loved it. And then I became pregnant, and my boss at the time was very angry that I was pregnant. And so the whole thing was very traumatic, because she had big plans for me, and me getting pregnant put a spanner in her works. And so it really became a very toxic working environment, where
Okay.
she was micromanaging and bullying me pretty much. And that sent my anxiety very high because I was born a people pleaser. I've worked on that over the years, but at the time, 21 years ago, I was sort of very early in my journey, and I ended up having a breakdown. I left the school, and I wasn't actually able to drive past a school, any school, for about 2 years. And so that opened me up to discovery of myself. And so I started studying psychology and hypnotherapy and counseling in an attempt really to understand what had happened to me, who
Mhm.
was a fairly intelligent, confident, independent person, reduced to somebody that had so much anxiety that they couldn't drive past any school for 2 years. That doesn't just
Yeah.
happen. And so I was very interested in why that had happened and to understand myself to that deeper level. And really, my journey sort of seriously studying psychology and sociology and all of those behavioral studies started from that point of me having a breakdown. And I was a gift, quite honestly, because it sent me on this journey of asking for more questions and understanding that nobody is immune from trauma and trauma responses. And this sort of was the foundation of my journey through that. And then when my 5 children were diagnosed on the spectrum years and years later in another country later, um,
Just
I
if
then took,
I can stop you a little bit here because
yeah.
the thing that you talk about is usually we once we have a problem, we start looking for the solution. We
Mm-hmm.
start looking for the questions. We start making that self-discovery. But if we before come to a trauma, before something's happened, what would be the tips that we should be doing daily or like an exercises or practices so we don't wait the third trauma until it happens and then we start looking and discovering ourselves through your experience. So if things come back to you with time to that point before that problems happen with you, if you have that certain level of awareness of yourself, I'm sure you will not be having the same experience, right?
Well, it's a very good question, and it's a realization that I've come to over decades of studying this, is
Mm-hmm.
that really it's the key and the power is in the proactive approach to mental fitness. And what you're saying is absolutely right. Instead of waiting, traditionally we wait for something to happen and then we react. And now there's being a change in attitudes, amongst the highest level of management as well, which is very exciting, where they're looking at proactive ways to be mentally strong and to nurture their teams and their families to be mentally strong as well. And so for me, I avoided a lot of things for a long time because I didn't want to deal with them. But then in a situation like the school situation where I needed to deal with it, I had none of the tools or the resources to actually deal with it. And so I was able to stand up for myself in the public, but in private, I crumbled. And so that was a really difficult time for me. Like I barely left the house for a year. So the first year of my first child's life was beautiful, but also a little bit isolating because I'd lost a lot of my confidence. And so this proactive approach is what I'm passionate about now. And so it's things like feeling the feelings. So I'm a big advocate of us having the whole range of full human emotions. We tend to label them as this is a good emotion, I want more of this. This is a bad emotion, I don't want this. But all of the emotions are there to tell us a story and give us feedback. And so through my time, and I've dealt with a lot of darkness in myself, I've dealt with very difficult dark times within my family, in my professional life. And what I have found to be true every time is when I step into it with curiosity and kindness, and I surrender to it, embrace it, and feel it, I get through it a lot quicker. Whereas when you fight it or you try and push it down or pretend it's not happening or, avoid it, it actually has control of you for a long time. And it's very hard to recover from that.
And that's most of the people are controlled by the outside environment is being like an ignorant state. And that's why they're in doubt and worry what's going on because they don't understand themselves. They don't understand their emotions. They don't understand why this is happening to them. And they thought that's it, that's life. And they keep continue doing that to lead to the anxiety level and even suppressing those emotions and not expressing it. And that's what lead to depression. So you talk about the courage. So you had to start with some point to put a line in the sand and say that this is my life. I'm responsible for my life, whatever it happens, but that needs courage. I love that word. So if you don't have that key, you'd keep suppressing all the time and you'll be to the point of disintegration.
But it is courageous to look at the parts of yourself that you don't want to look at.
Yes, it needs courage.
Because it's confronting.
Yeah, you have one day, you have to be responsible. You have to take the courage to do that, to bet on yourself because no one other than you will help you. So if you went through your story, which I love so much, and there's lots of lessons all the audience will learn from it, is you've been there. Anyone could be there. I could be there. The first thing, you start studying. You make that decision to go through your life and say why this is happening to me. And I want to understand. I go for this self-discovery. So could you tell us more how you start developing and be proactive in controlling and understanding yourself?
I think stepping into a state of observation and curiosity, because we tend to be very hard on ourselves. We tend to say, well, that was a failure. I made a mistake. I wasn't strong enough. I wasn't good enough. I didn't. And when we go into it with that attitude, we close ourselves off from a lot of answers. But when we step into curiosity and say, that was such an interesting experience, like, I really don't want to go through that again. What are the observational points here? How did I show up? How did the other person show up? Did I contribute to that situation happening? Was my communication clear enough? Were my expectations clear? And so taking on that ability to self-reflect, but again, without that negativity attached, because we tend to berate ourselves. We tend to focus on the 10% that we seemingly didn't get right and ignore the 90% that we got right. That's human nature. But if we can just say, instead of mistakes, this was a really interesting learning opportunity. This was a very cool growth period for me, because for me, some of the darkest times of my life brought with it some of the best lessons, the most profound wisdom, and the reconstructed strength, which became the foundation for my next chapter.
I love that. So curiosity leads you to wherever you are right now. And there's no limit for curiosity because it's moving the human being to know more about themselves and more discovery. But If we could list like the lessons you have learned from going through the self-discovery and the personal growth process, because it's not a destination. Okay, I know myself, that's it. It's a journey, and the more you know yourself, the more capabilities you understand that you have, which is infinite. So if you could share with the audience the lessons you have learned and the necessity of going through this self-discovery sooner or later, because there's no will be perfect time for that.
Yeah, there's never a perfect time. And it can be very painful at times.
It maybe, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've been through a lot of psychological pain in that self-discovery journey. It's not everybody's experience, but
Mm-hmm.
that has been mine experience. But here's what it teaches you. It teaches
Yes,
you a
please.
level of humility.
Mm-hmm.
So I sort of try to live my life with the philosophy of I am that I am. So when people are pointing fingers and condemning somebody, I reflect and think, if I was faced with the same childhood, with the same experiences, with the same challenges, with the same pain, with the same all of the circumstances, am I capable of reacting like that person? The likelihood is yes, I am. The only reason that I'm not demonstrating those behaviors is because I've had a different life experience. So I think when you do your journey of self-discovery, it makes you more open and curious about the journeys of other people, which gives you more humility, gives you more kindness in your response, more patience, more understanding, and you begin to look for reasons to connect rather than the reasons to condemn. And really, if we're wanting global peace, we need to look for reasons to be connected and look for reasons that we're the same rather than the reasons that we're different. And only on your own self-discovery, the more I learn, the quieter I am, the less I argue, the more I'm curious in observation, and the kinder I try to be, because I don't know what somebody's going through. And this is one of the fundamental lessons I learned when teaching, was to look beyond the behavior that I was being shown to the core of what was showing it. And then that's filtered through my parenting. So my children are on the spectrum. They've been hospitalized through bullying on several occasions. Okay. Now, I've worked through my own human reaction to that. I'm not a robot. I'm a very protective mother. So I have the anger, I have the outrage, I have all of those feelings, but privately. I don't respond from that place. I allow myself the full human reaction, and then I come back to the center, which my intention is for my place where I respond to any situation is a place of love. And I think, okay, what if this person who's hurt my child was somebody that I loved? How would I respond to them then? And I've responded from that place, and it's always been a great success for everybody involved. So it's sort of moving, when you do this work on yourself, you're able to move more from a me to we. So instead of what am I going to get out of it, how am I going to get satisfaction? You say, how can we all come together and create a solution for everybody in this situation? And it's not easy. It is not easy. It's so much harder to reach for love and forgiveness than it is for anger and revenge.
It's an energy, but that's all about us. It starts from us. Our problems is we're waiting others to love us until we exchange love with them. And it will never happen like this way. So it's whatever energy you're sending to others, it would return exactly the same back to you. And once you have that certain level of understanding, you start understanding yourself. And this is how you understand others. And it depends on your attitude toward others. And that's what define your results by default. So it's all about us. It's all about every person to be responsible of his or her life and just be aware of what his actions, because it's not about the actions, it's about starting with the thoughts that he's thinking or she's thinking of, and then the feelings, because the thoughts will stirs the feelings and feelings will make you do the actions. And every one of us have those like traumas in his identity, and it's okay, he can change that and he can overcome that through that self-discovery and personal growth process, and he needs someone with him or with her, because alone I think it's not easy. What do you think?
There's certain sections of your journey that you do alone.
Mm-hmm.
But it's important to understand when you hit these same results again and again, that's the point where you've got some sort of blind spot and you're going to need some sort of professional guidance to help you go through that. And it takes courage to do that. I mean, I work with professionals, leaders, business owners, and it's
Mm-hmm.
incredibly courageous to come and say, hey, I've got a real block in this area for me, and it's filtering into all areas of my life. That's courageous when you're leading teams and you're very visible, you know.
Exactly.
But here's the thing as well, the compartmentalization of work and home is dissolving now. And so people are understanding, if my home life is a mess, it's filtering into my business. If my business is a mess, it's filtering into my home life. So we need to incorporate all of that, which is a wonderful new chapter for everybody.
Um, Now let's elaborate more on having the leadership characteristics and core values and those mentorship in home, at home, being a mother. So if we talk about the necessity of having those core values, let's say, and applying it at home, because everything starts from home. So could you share more about your experience regarding that?
Well, living your principles is paramount
Mm-hmm.
in any situation, professional or personal. You can't tell people what to do, you have to show them by example. And so, you know, if you're teaching kindness, if you're teaching your children to take responsibility and have accountability, you need to do it yourself. And it's not easy. You know, I've been in situations where I could have quite easily hidden under the duvet and never come out again. But I thought, well, no, I need to address this. And sharing those experiences with my children and them being allowed to watch me navigate through that. And it wasn't comfortable. It's so important. And one of the things that we discovered as a family, quite unexpectedly, was our children who were watching our success and then having all of this pressure on themselves to be successful, because my husband and I weren't consciously sharing any of our quote unquote failures, which we prefer to say experiences,
Mm-hmm.
because we would just, you know, find a block or challenge, we'd navigate through it and we get to the other side, but we didn't communicate that. And so it's about allowing them to see you in all of the colors of the rainbow and being able to say, like one example, my husband had been studying for a big exam. This was years ago, and he failed the exam, and he worked really, really hard to do that exam. And so we made a point of saying around the table, Daddy had his exam and he failed. And everyone's like, oh no, Dad. And he's like, yeah, I'm gutted. I worked so hard for that exam. I feel really, really sad right now. And they're like, yeah, Dad, absolutely. But he said, but you know what? I'm going to have a break. I'm going to feel down for today and tomorrow. And then I'm going to pull my socks up and I'm going to have another go.
Love
But
it.
we included them in the process. And so when we're leading, it's important, whether it's in your personal life or your professional life, to have the courage to show your vulnerability in order for your team or your kids to have the courage to share their vulnerabilities. We can't demand it. We have to create the culture and the environment where it can blossom on its own.
Amazing. And I love that story, being like leading by example, because most of what I've seen, that when once they are raising their children, they just do this, do that. It's about directions. It's not about giving the choices and explaining the why behind that, and just being leading by example, which is the main thing I've seen. And that's here the necessity of leadership to apply it. It's about applying the things. It's not about teaching the things. You cannot teach that. It should come from the essence of who we are, and just be who we are, because once we just be ourselves, and that's the highest level of freedom, just be yourself.
But that's
If Yeah.
so hard and challenging at times. I mean,
Yeah.
my daughter used to have this recurring dream. She's 21 now and way
Hmm.
past school, but school was really not for her. She was a decent student, but the school environment wasn't for her. And I came home once from a dinner out, and my husband said, "Oh, you need to go and talk to Sky." And I said, "Oh," it was like 12 o'clock at night, midnight. I was like, "Oh, I'm so tired." But I was like, okay. I took 2 cups of cocoa into her bedroom, and she was distressed, and she had these what we call frenemies. So they were friends at school, but they were nasty to her out of school. It was very nasty. And she said, "Mum, I have this dream." She said that I have these amazing wings. And she said, I tie those wings behind my back every day, and I go to school and I pretend to be somebody that I'm not. And then at nighttime, she said, I come home, and she said, you take me to the oval, which is a massive space. And she said, at night when nobody's there, and she said, you unclip my wings and you let me fly. And I said, well, that's a really interesting dream. And then we had this discussion that she had 2 choices of hard. I wasn't able to sugarcoat it. Do you know what I mean? You have to be honest, but you have to
Yes.
try and talk things through and give them the options and
Yes.
create independent thinkers so that they can, when they leave you, they can manage their own lives, right? We're not jumping in and fixing everything. And so I said to her, you need to choose your own hard. I said, there's 2 options for you here, as far as I can see. Number one, you continue doing what you're doing. You continue to go into school and pretend to be somebody that you're not, to try and fit in with these people who are actually being quite unkind to you anyway. But that is an option of survival through this next couple of years, if that's what you choose. Or you choose to say, blow it. I'm going to be the fullest version, the weirdest version, the wackiest version of me that I can possibly be. I don't care who likes me and who doesn't like me. And I said, you understand that that might be a bit lonely because you might not be hanging out with them, but you go into school with your iPad or your sketching book or a book to read or whatever, and understand that you're going to be okay on your own. You don't need anybody else. And I said, that's another option for you. So I said, either way, I completely support you. Whatever you decide, there's no judgment from me. Whatever feels like the right fit for you. And you decide on your path forward, but you do have choices in this. You do have choices. You do have some control. And she decided she was sick of jumping through hoops. She was sick of pretending to be somebody she wasn't. And so she went full out geek and full out weird. And yes, she was a little bit lonely sometimes, but she was happier in herself because she was being true to herself. And now she's fully herself. That was the foundation of her confidence, and now she's really developed that confidence. But it's really about allowing them to have the experiences, because as parents, we tend to want to protect them. Of course we do. But if we don't allow them to experience some of the difficult, heavy, complicated, sometimes painful things, what are they going to do when they leave us and they're faced with these situations? They
Exactly.
won't have anything in their toolbox to handle it. And we've been through some of the most awful experiences with mental health issues and all sorts of things with our kids. But if we'd have gone in and fixed it, we're unconsciously saying to them, we don't think you can handle this.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas we say, hey, this sucks right now. We totally see you. We totally hear you. Your feelings and thoughts are valid and they're important to us. Let's explore your options forward. You've got this. And then they can step into the next version of themselves with full support. I'm not suggesting you send them out to pasture and say, bye, good luck. You're there as a support system, but you're nurturing them and supporting them while they are navigating through it. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, here's the necessity of the family and the dad and mom, because there's lots of things that are essential they will never learn at school or even in college or university. Number one is who we are, how we think, how we feel, to understand ourselves, understand our capabilities. And number two is about earning money. And number three is the choices and the decision. They never taught us the necessity and the importance of taking decisions. That's why you see lots of children, they are lost and they don't know what to do, and they're having those doubt and worry always, or fear sometimes, because they thought that's it, it's the end. So once they have this open choices and they show that the world is huge, that there's lots of ways, this would release lots of blockage in themselves, and this would really make them free to choose and move forward and just expand and get to the point of creativity.
Mm. But I think as well, adding to that, it's the infinite options with strong leadership. And so with our kids, we've had a very strong scaffold. Like we're strict parents. Kindness is non-negotiable. Respect is non-negotiable. All of these, like the core fundamental pieces,
Yes.
honor,
Yeah, that
integrity,
should be
hard
there.
work ethic, that is the scaffold that's non-negotiable. But
Mm-hmm.
within that, they are able to make their decisions, and within those sort of code of
Exactly.
ethics and integrity, I think there has been a slight misunderstanding globally of what child-centered is. Child-centered is acknowledging the child's feelings, thoughts, all of the things, you know, fantastic, but with strong leadership. Whereas it's started to go in some factions into child indulgent, where parents never say no, they never put any boundaries down, you know, they sort of free range, but then the child ends up feeling lost and directionless, you know. Whereas if you involve them in the decision making process and you listen to
That's
them and you have the conversations, it's harder than saying yes to everything, and it's harder than saying no to everything.
no,
You know,
exactly.
there's two extremes. But one of my kids, when she was 16, well, it's the same daughter, she had these frenemies, and one time they included her in an invitation, and she was so excited about it. And it was going to be in a barn in the middle of nowhere. She was 15, there were going to be 18-year-old boys there. I knew damn well it wasn't going to be supervised because I knew the family. And I knew instantly I wasn't going to be able to support her in going, but I knew it was so important that she went. And I said to her, look, darling, I said, I'm going to have to talk to dad about this. I said, bear with me. I said, we'll discuss it. We understand how important it is to you, and we'll come back to you. So I spoke to my husband. He went, it's a no. And I went, yes, I realized that. But I said, we have to include her in this. We have to honor the fact that this is so important to her. To us, it's just a party. To her, it's everything right now.
Exactly.
And so we need to show her that we are seriously considering it. We care about her thoughts and feelings, and we're involving her. And so when I went back to her and said, you know, darling, we've talked about it, and she said, it's a no, isn't it? And I said, I'm so sorry. I said, we can't support you in going because of these reasons. And I said, we can't knowingly put you in those situations. There's too many things uncontrolled. There's too many things that can go wrong, etc. So she was a bit bleak with us for a couple of days because obviously we told her no. She took it on the chin pretty well. But what's interesting is now that she's an adult, she reflects back on that and said, Mum, I'm so glad you said no to me. Because she said, I see where they are now and I see where I am now, and it's very different paths. And so it's about having the courage as leaders, as parents, to make the tough choices when they're going to be unpopular.
Exactly. So it's being a leader or leadership and mentorship. It's not being only in the professional. It starts on the personal level, on the personal aspect. So what would be your last insight or a message to the parents?
Don't hold your children to any standard that you are not upholding yourself.
That's lovely. Really, Cathy, I want to thank you for this amazing episode, and looking forward to have you on another one. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.